Am I the asshole for yelling at my sister that my wedding is not her wedding? I, 29F, am planning my wedding for September of this year. It's the end of summer and also the month I met my fiancé. My sister, Kat, 33F, was supposed to get married 5 years ago, but her partner died in a motorcycle accident. She was devastated, and had a hard time. Since then, she's been very gloomy, and her relationships don't last long. She goes to therapy on and off. When I told my family that I was getting married, Kat was visibly sad, so my mom asked me to involve her in the planning and to ask for her opinion to make her feel part of it. However, she didn't agree with my choice of September, thinking it's a bad month for a wedding. She also didn't like the colors I picked or the dress I wanted. I tried to listen to her sometimes. At one point, she said, "I can't believe you'll be the first daughter not our father is going to walk down the aisle." I was gutted by her comment. I'm not having a religious ceremony. My fiancé's best friend got a license to officiate our marriage, so it's not that serious. With that in mind, I'm planning the wedding to reflect our personalities. My best friend suggested that the bridesmaids wear different colored dresses, but my sister didn't agree. She made some comments like, "It'll look like a gay pride parade," and, "You're turning your wedding into a gay wedding by listening to all your friends' suggestions." Yes, my best friend is gay, but we have similar tastes, so his opinions are highly valued because they match mine. Last week, we were organizing the entrance of our bridesmaids and best men. In our culture, we call them godfathers, godmothers, and they enter together. I told her that my best friend would enter with his boyfriend. My sister then said my wedding was going to be an absolute circus, and that, as my older sister, she should make me see reason. She insisted that two men shouldn't enter the ceremony together because not all guests would understand and appreciate it. Her comments were very annoying and homophobic. She continued with her remarks and even called my fiancé to get his opinion. At some point, I was fed up and yelled, "You're out of line because this is my wedding and not yours. Have your own wedding and plan it as you want." I was very angry, and my mom came from the garden to see what was happening. Kat started crying and went to her room. It's been 5 days, and she's giving me the silent treatment. She told my mom that she won't be attending my wedding. It's very annoying. She tries to make me feel uncomfortable. For example, if she's in the kitchen and I enter, she leaves. Yesterday, my mom said I should apologize because my sister is fragile and this topic makes her suffer. However, I don't think I'm that much of an asshole. My mom said that yelling at her was an asshole move, even if I was right. It's been years, your sister needs therapy. If your mom and sister won't go to your wedding because you finally shut down your sister's unceasing suggestions, well, it's them that will miss out. Proceed without them. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Apparently it's family members sticking up for shitty people who act shitty to the point one loses their temper around them day. Yes, adults like Op should be able to control their temper and moderate their behavior. But we have a saying for this: people who can dish it out but not take it. People like OP's sister can't expect to be aggressively rude, demeaning, negatively opinionated, and unpleasant without having some pushback on that. And if they ignore more gentle social cues, they're going to get a verbal shotgun unloaded in their face. Tell your mom that the problem isn't that sister is too sensitive. It's that she's too insensitive, and maybe your mom should get on that problem with some belated parenting efforts to help your sister adjust course out of being shitty. Not the asshole. And I think her not attending might be for the best if she can't control herself. No matter if the root of her loss of control comes from grief. Her homophobia is another reason. Have this wedding the exact way you want. You will most likely only have this one. And the memories will last a lifetime, hopefully. Not the asshole as a gay man. Your sister can go FK herself. Uninvite her from the wedding. Her grief has nothing to do with her being a disgusting bigot. Not the asshole. In no way should you be the one apologizing. Your mother's attitude about this is exactly why your sister thinks her behavior is okay. Not the asshole. You've already been showing her a lot of consideration. And you're in a no-win situation. Homophobia is not an expression of grief, and she doesn't get to be hostile towards your best friend and his boyfriend. Am I the asshole for leaving without explanation after mother-in-law pretended not to hear me? I 32F have a 7 Malio daughter with my husband 34M.
My country does ensure a long maternity leave for up to 2 years. However, I am self-employed and cannot afford to lose my clients, so I try to work while my daughter is sleeping and during the weekends. Lately she's been teething, so I'm operating on little to no sleep.
I have an issue with my mill. She does what she wants despite people asking her not to, and then says, oops, or denies doing it. Things like that.
It was annoying before the baby, but after she was born it has become insufferable. Husband talked to her and set boundaries, so she stopped doing that when my husband is present, but she was still doing it when it's only me in the room.
So we agreed she cannot visit when husband is not at home, and husband is not to leave me alone with her.
Because of these boundaries we did not see them for 1.5 months.
They live 2 hours away and we did not find a mutually good time.
They finally came over last Sunday. 20 million into the visit, my father-in-law wants to see a lawnmower that has broken down, so my husband goes into the backyard with him, leaving me, the baby and mother-in-law inside.
She's drinking coffee and eating cake. She sits next to my daughter on her playmat and tries to feed her some of her cake.
I immediately told her no, she can't have that.
Mother-in-law pretends not to hear me and proceeds putting her spoon to my daughter's closed mouth. I repeat, stop doing that. She can't have cake yet, and definitely not from your spoon. Still she pretends not to hear me. I repeat it again, still nothing, and now there's cake on my baby's face and she's fussing.
So I grab my daughter and go to my husband and Phil, subtly gesturing him to come back inside. After about 5 millions, mother-in-law decided to go outside too and was approaching me and the baby. I gestured to my husband again and he made an annoyed face. I had no energy to deal with any of this, so I stood up, went inside, grabbed baby bag and car keys and went to the car without saying a word. Mother-in-law asked me where I was going and I ignored her. I drove to my sister's, which is about 15 million drive. There were some missed calls from my husband, so I texted him where we were and that we'll be back in the evening. It was time for my daughter's nap and she fell asleep breastfeeding, so my sister told me to go sleep too. After she woke up and had her milk, my sister took her and told me to go back to sleep.
I slept 3 hours in total and my phone was on silent, so my husband's calls were ignored and apparently his parents left disappointed and Mel cried. My husband is furious I did this. We're still fighting about it. He can't believe I was so rude and took the baby away when his parents came to see her after such a long time. He's angry I couldn't have waited a few minutes so that he could finish talking about the lawnmower. I told him I'm too exhausted to deal with this shit. He left me alone with mother-in-law despite our agreement, be it only 10 millions, so I left. Am I the asshole? Not the asshole. Your mother-in-law should respect your boundaries, and especially when it's about your baby. And your husband should have your back on that. I do understand that it must be uncomfortable and hurt him, seeing his mother cry and be upset, but then he should talk to her about it instead of making you the bad person. The only thing I think you did wrong was that you didn't pick your daughter up after the first time you said it and mother-in-law didn't listen. Maybe that would have made things go more smooth, but then again it shouldn't really be necessary.
I do think that it is important that you stand up for your boundaries, and your husband should support you on that.
Sorry if my English isn't perfect, it's not my first language, but I did my best. Grin. Not the asshole. What is it with older people and feeding cake to babies?
My grandma tried to give cake to my daughter when she was 3 or 4 months old. Cake to your 7-month-old child against your explicit instructions? From a shared spoon?
Mill should have gotten kicked out of the house.
But I understand you're wanting to keep the peace and removing yourself and your child from this situation.
Husband has to do a better job communicating with his parents. You are not the asshole. Not the asshole.
Mother-in-law can't go 10 minutes without trying to pull something?
That's not your fault or problem. Not the asshole. Why does he care more about your Mill's feelings than yours? I'd show him this post so he can read the comments.
The deal was that she's only around the baby when he's there. That's a useless deal if he's not physically there in the room. The fact that she started with her bullshit immediately after he left shows she can control herself and does it on purpose.
Your husband is blind and spineless. Less than he left me alone with mother-in-law despite our agreement, be it only 10 millions.
Less than, so I grab my daughter and go to my husband and Phil, subtly gesturing him to come back inside.
Less than I gestured to my husband again and he made an annoyed face. Not the asshole. BTW, you have an awesome sister. Am I the asshole for telling my brother that he has no idea what he's talking about because he isn't a parent?
I, 26M, have 3 kids under 5, 4F and 2M, with a 4th kid on its way. Before we had kids, my wife and I had lots of ideas about the parents we were going to be, and we had lots of scorn for people who parented in ways we disagreed with, but, as any parent knows, actually raising kids is hard work and you will break your values. My brother, 22M, is doing a psychology degree, with a few modules on child psychology and development. He regularly tells me that he thinks iPad kids are spoiled brats who will struggle developmentally and they are the spawn of lazy, negligent parents.
I wouldn't say my kids are iPad kids, but they do have an iPad between the 3 of them and more screen time that I would ideally like, but sometimes them's the breaks.
My brother also disapproves of the fact we give our kids sweets as bribes, occasionally, and have lied to our kids. Every time he tells me his views on parenting, I just laugh and tell him to try being a parent, then I'll take his advice. Recently, due to an emergency, my wife and I needed a babysitter for a whole day, so I called my brother because, despite his judgment, he is actually very good with our kids. When we got home in the evening, the kids were in bed having had dinner and we thanked him profusely. He very earnestly told us that, now he had experienced being a parent, he realized that not letting your kids use screens was very easy and they hadn't watched TV or used their iPad in the 12 hours he'd been there.
He also said he'd calmed their fears, they had been aware of the emergency a little bit, read to them, not had to bribe them to do anything with sweets, and he dealt with very calm, relaxed children, as opposed to the brats they normally are when they're with me, his words. He gave us a 20-minute lecture about our bad parenting, and now that he was in a position to give advice, he was going to give it. We'd been planning on giving him £200 to thank him for doing this for us short notice and looking after the kids for so long, but we sent him on his way without any pay. The next day I called him up to tell him I thought his behavior was incredibly inappropriate, that I appreciated him looking after the kids but it was better he didn't see them for a while, and that him springing that all on us especially after a day of stress showed how immature he really was. I told him that he actually didn't know anything about parenting because he wasn't a parent. I concede I may have gone too far, but my mum called me up later to tell me my brother was crying and she called me a dickhead because he was just trying to help, and apparently I'm a bad parent for dealing with people's kindness so rudely. My brother and parents are pissed off at me and not talking to me, so am I the asshole? You are the asshole. We had lots of scorn for people who parented in ways we disagreed with. This really set the tone for your post.
You and your wife seem aggressive and judgmental. Something tells me your brother did not lecture you about your parenting and just reported how the kids did, and you took it way too personally.
You are the asshole. Sounds like your childless brother is a better parent than you.
Maybe listen to him?
You are the asshole. Yeah, sure, maybe he could have been more gentle in the way he told you, but he's right, and I think that's what made you upset more than anything.
If you have to bribe your kids to listen to you, then you have a problem. You shouldn't have 4 kids if you don't know how to take of them without having to bribe them to listen to you.
Esh. Your kids are going to end up being brats if you don't quit with the bribery and screen time.
Your brother's child psychology courses have made him a bit of a pompous ass. Still, you don't have to be a parent to recognize bad parenting, just like you don't have to be a plumber to spot a leaky pipe. Summarized. My brother has no respect for me as a parent, even though I admit I do all the things he says aren't great for kids.
Also, he's literally getting training in this specific area and is amazing with the kids, but I still have no respect for him or his opinion. You are the asshole. You are the asshole.
Bribe your kids with sweets?
Great parenting there. I bet you became the very type of parents that you were scornful of before. Try to be a bigger man and apologize for not paying for services that you selfishly used. Be better because you have an example to set. Am I the asshole for sending my parents on a wild goose chase that almost got to the Canadian border?
I, F27, do not live at home.
I do not take money from my parents. I don't really rely on them for anything. I have a job and I just put a down payment on my first home. My parents think I am a helpless damsel. I had to get the locks changed on my apartment because they had an emergency key that they used randomly. When I asked for it back, they refused. One of my friends recently went on a date with a creepy guy that put an Apple tracker in her car. She has an app that detects them, so she found it and tossed it in the river. I got the app because I am out there dating and I got concerned after hearing this story. I am seeing someone right now and it seems to be going well.
He seems a decent fellow. Yes, that's a Princess Bride quote.
Anyway, I found a tracker on my car. I thought it was the guy. I didn't want to give him any clue that I found it. So I tossed it onto a pallet of produce my company has headed to Canada. It turns out it wasn't him. I did not go see my parents this last weekend but went golfing instead.
The guy the first I'm seeing called, but I said I was busy.
He was cool with it. My parents, on the other hand, called me a dozen times. I said I was golfing. They asked where and I told them. I put my phone in Do Not Disturb and had fun with my friends. My dad called me from Boise, Idaho to ask why I threw away their tracker. I laughed and said I would have to apologize to the guy I'm seeing because I assumed it was him doing something that's shady. My parents are upset that I scared them and called me ungrateful for making light of their concerns. So, obviously not the asshole.
And likewise a funny and well-crafted post.
Good job all around.
But in the real world, this is grounds for a restraining order. You need to cut contact and get a shit ton of boundaries set up, because this isn't the way parents treat helpless damsels. This is controlling and insane, and it will only escalate.
What happens when they start showing up to your job to check in on you? What happens when they start tailing your future fiancé? What happens when they decide you aren't parenting your toddler right and try to pick her up from school? Not the asshole. This level of helicopter parenting on an almost 30-yo is nuts. Have a sit-down meal with your parents at a nice restaurant. People are less likely to make a scene if they are somewhere nice or in public. Tell them that the tracker was out of line, and it was stalker-level behavior. They need to be treating you like a capable adult. You don't need to list out accomplishments to them, as they already know what you have going on and have still chosen to behave this way, tracking your every move on their phones like creeps. Tell them if they can't start showing some respect for boundaries, you may need to go low contact until they can do so. If you do need to keep your word on this, please stick to it. This is not okay and not how parents build a healthy relationship with their child. Called me ungrateful. Why do they keep using that word? I do not think it means what they think it means. Not the asshole. They should be grateful you allow them in your life at all after shenanigans like this and with the level of intrusion they're attempting. This is insane, stalkerish behavior. Since they won't set reasonable boundaries, you need to. Good luck keeping them in line. Not the asshole. Get a ROUS. Restraining order of unusual size. LMFAO. I would have let them drive to Canada. LMFAO. Your post is so lighthearted for something so horrifying. You're saying your parents were sneaking into your house without your permission to the point you had to change locks? And that your parents literally tried to follow you on a road trip? That's not funny or annoying. It's really disturbing. Not the asshole, but I'm really afraid for your privacy inside your home and on your devices.